Welcome to Comic Book Nation's bonus round, where we take time to address things that we could not fit in our show that addresses all things geek culture. This time around, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Matthew Aguilar, because if you are watching this, then you already know that The Witcher is back on Netflix. The Witcher Season 3, Part 1 has dropped on Netflix today as we are recording this. Me and Matt has had some time to go through this. He's done interviews. He is our big Witcher fan. I am more a casual fan of the TV show. I never played the games or read the books, but I've been burning through this. I'm almost done with Part 1. I know what happens at the end. We're here to talk and break it down and discuss some things because there's some interesting things happening with the Witcher series right now. Season 3 is dropping at a very pivotal point. A lot of spheres crossing here, and there's a lot to talk about. So, just for some setup, as we get into this, like I said, a lot of pivotal time for the series, right? Netflix, it's taken a couple years to get from Season 2 to Season 3.
Yeah.
In that time, though, the franchise has not been idle.
Right.
Netflix has expanded it into a whole universe. We've had 2 prequels, one about Geralt's mentor, and one about the first group of people who came together to create the first Witcher and start this whole line off, which was also framed as a prequel tied to a larger story arc where Jaskier is kind of selected to be this almost like divine celestial witness kind of guy. Straight, Kingdom Come DC for anybody trying to wrap their head around what we're talking about here. And he's witnessing the beginning of the Witchers and the collision, the incursion of all the spheres that form this new world in order to prepare for some larger thing that's coming. So this is the first time we've gotten like this larger universal framework for this larger threat, beyond just what's happening with Geralt and Ciri. But when we left the main series, Geralt and Ciri had gotten together. There was this big kind of falling out between Geralt and Yennefer that they were trying to kind of move past, and this kind of surrogate family structure that we got by the end of Season 2. And that's where Season 3 picks up.
Yeah.
So, if you haven't listened, we also did our regular Comic Book Nation episode where we did a non-spoiler review of The Witcher and talked about our initial impressions of it. Just to kind of kick things off, because I know I'll be the shorter one of these two because I'm just an amateur Witcher fan. But I've liked Season 3, Part 1, so far. I know where it ends, and I wasn't as thrilled about the ending of it. I think it ends on kind of a muted note. And I think the trick of a Part 1 is usually to hook you into a Part 2. Matt's convinced me to keep watching because the next part comes out in just a month.
Yeah.
And he knows the books in the series, and he says this next part's going to get pretty wild. And that's why they had to cut it here. So I'm going on the faith of yours, but I've enjoyed Season 3. I feel like for the first time I've grown into The Witcher. I understand like the larger sense of the lore, the characters, their history, which could be a confusing thing in Season 1 because it crosses so much time for several different characters. And one character who's just young and is not part of that history, and getting all those time periods straight and all the characters straight was hard. Season 2 was a little more streamlined because it was not, again, across so much history, but like this is the most streamlined it's ever been. Like everything's been put in place over the course of the 2 seasons, and you see all the intricate pieces that had to happen. Because I watched the recap for Season 3, and I was like, oh my god, there's so much. The secondary stories you forget that happened. All these secondary characters whose names I can't remember, like the guy in the beginning series who was like the crazy like hunter swordsman and where he's ended up now. All the stuff with the elves and what's happened within their race, and dead babies and all that stuff I've forgotten about. I was like, good lord, there's some stuff that's brutal, gone down on The Witcher. A lot of babies got sacrificed in this show just to get us where we are. But even Yennefer's backstory and how intricate and all those pieces were, and all of that, and the mages and all that, the different nations. But now they've all come together and converged enough, not just in the main trio, that I understand what's going on. I understand the threats. It's more Game of Thronesian in that sense. And I'm not comparing this. I don't think The Witcher's like tried to be Game of Thrones.
Right. But just the political intrigue
and stuff is easy enough to follow now. And I understand the kind of the beats of who the Witchers are, the mysticism, the darkness, the beasts, all that. and how it fits together. And I think this season, at the very least, has the strongest start of any of the seasons. We're watching a video now, if you're just listening to this, of the battle sequence in the first episode, which is like the best battle sequence I think in this show so far.
It's awesome.
It's awesome.
And there's more after this, and it's
and
just
there's
so
one
good.
before this, which is Cavill when he just appears and the most badass Geralt of Rivia we have outside of a house, and he just quickly deals with some guys that are hunting them. And yeah, it has not lost a step for action and gore. And Cavill's, I mean, obviously been training and playing Geralt better than ever.
Right.
And like, yeah, there's a great start. The first 2 episodes, there's some really terrifying monsters in this. Like a potato bug thing that can smell really well, and that nightmarish thing like a Cronenberg monster, like just made out of the pieces of the different women with the hands, which is one of the most frightening things I've seen in this series to date. It's just like, that is so nasty and gross. But also like, yeah, some good turns. Like now I'm getting into more of kind of like the story turns and the deepening, like where Geralt and Yennefer are really starting to reconnect. The mages and all those pieces are starting to really move a lot faster, and the elves kind of forming and all their kind of shifting factions are starting to form. So I'm digging it. I'm digging The Witcher. I feel like I'm in a world finally, and I feel like I'm part of this world. But Matt, as the hardcore Witcher fan, how are you feeling?
No, I agree with you. I think season 3 has done the best job of blending all of those aspects together, of bringing those characters together and having them interact, and you understanding like Cahir has a whole storyline in here. They established Robbie Amell, shout out Robbie Amell, gets some time in here as Gallatin.
That was Robbie Amell? Yeah, I saw him and I was like, is that Robbie Amell? I was like, I feel like we know him.
Yeah.
Like, he's been on here.
He's just introduced in season 3. Great job. Like, you already get like a feel for him, and he's got an actual storyline with Cahir.
I will say, this is the one thing that does trip me out still about this show, though. I saw him, and I was like panicking. I was like, is he somebody I should remember or not remember? Yeah. And I was like, oh God. And I couldn't remember. And I was like, that's why I saw it was Robbie Amell. But I was like, but my brain was telling me, like, if Robbie Amell was in this show before, I feel like I would have picked it up by now.
And as we learn, he has a specific role to play. It's unfortunate that, I mean, we're talking spoilers, so he dies. He ends up getting sacrificed essentially so that Cahir can kind of get back into the good graces of the king and everything. But even that, like, you've seen Cahir be at the highest of highs in season 1, season 2, lowest of lows. He's being punished. He's out there like and then in 3, and same way we see Fringilla, who's just like wine tasting now in like this prison.
That was one of the most unexpectedly fun, because I didn't pay attention to her character in the first 2 seasons hardly at all. Like, and then this, and she showed up again. Because there was this memory jog. I mean, I watched the recap, but when I saw her in prison, I was like, okay, should I care about... And I was like, oh, I remember her.
Right.
And then
as this powerful sorceress that, like...
And now she's doing the tasting. Yeah. She can taste poisons. And I was like, oh, this is... But I actually enjoyed that. Like, that first scene with her in a conversation with a guy who dies next to her. Because he tastes the poison. And it's so nonchalant. He's, like, talking to her, and he just drifts off, and she's still, like, in her head talking. And then she looks over, and she's like, oh, another one.
Yeah, and she smuggles herself out.
Yeah, smuggling the body bag.
There's a lot of the side stories are compelling unto themselves. That's why, kind of like during our non-spoiler video, I was talking about, like, there's enough outside of Geralt and just Henry Cavill being in the show that it's built enough of that outside stuff to be, it feels like a world. It feels like he is a major but one aspect of a world. It's Yarpin, like all that stuff that happens with him, and like he gives them the house, and he's just this fun side character. And during this battle, you mentioned like you're kind of more concerned for him and his guys, and I was the same. Like you see the cavalry come, it's like, please don't die, please don't die.
If they ever kill him, I'm out, bro.
He's
like
so
I'm just
good.
out. Like I can't.
Yeah, so they do such a good job of that. And then the elves, especially, like the stuff with Francesca, and like there's a whole story just within that of like her seeking out Ciri because she sees that as the solution. She's more tied to ancient prophecies and tradition. And then you have Gallatin over here like, hey, you're killing my men, just looking for this girl. Yeah. You've been looking for her for so long, like you're not. And he makes a valid point. That's why you invest in that. So they're doing a really good job of building the world. We also meet like some fun characters early on. Geralt goes to meet they're kind of in the bookkeeper's place, and it's the one where like he throws the heart and the door.
Yeah,
it's like a straight trap. Yeah, they go through that, and then you build that to the point where later, when Rience comes in,
and he's like, "What did you tell them?"
And just slaughters them.
Those poor old people are like, and I think you're right. You're nailing on the head. Like this, and I think what I was trying to say is like when I'm in this universe is like I care.
Yeah,
I recognize people. I remember their stories. I care about them, and I care about the scenes that are about these secondary characters. Which is bringing up an interesting point, because during our main show, I was saying to you, like, I was checking the Rotten Tomatoes of it all, and it was boggling my mind. Like, season 2 of the show is kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
Both of it's like middling critics, middling audience. But season 1 has this high audience score and this abysmal critic score, which is surprising because I felt like audiences had the hardest time keeping up with what was happening in season 1. This one has a high critical score, season 3, but seems to be having a lower audience score.
Yeah.
And I was reading, and we were talking about during the show, like, is this Henry Cavill leaving? These are review bombs. And there are quite a few of them if you read the Rotten Tomatoes. But the other thing that people are criticizing, saying, like, oh, this one is not enough Geralt. It's too many of these other characters, and I don't care. And I'm like, I'm completely the opposite.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, at this point, I care a lot about, just like a Game of Thrones show. It's not just about, like, I'm not watching Ned Stark. Couldn't watch him too long. He played wrong. But I care about all of these other characters in these other scenes. Like, I care what Jaskier's doing when he goes to meet,
his scenes are hilarious,
that crazy king. I even care about the king and like that crazy king or Prince and his brother. Yeah,
Prince Radovid. Yeah. Oh, he's fantastic.
And his brother, who turns out to be like the most dunder-headed, possibly Machiavellian. He's like cousin Greg of this whole thing. But he is, because he looks like so dumb, but he's actually scheming. And like, these are all interesting to me. Because I feel like you need this stuff to really understand like what this world is. You need to follow these different characters. And in some ways, I think not being more Game of Thronesian in that hurt the show before.
Yeah.
Because trying to just follow these 3 characters and understand what's going on with them and why it's important to them and all these names that are being thrown at you that they're listening to is more confusing than getting to meet the characters, see them all.
Agreed.
And kind of understand for yourself.
I think part of it, you're right. I think part of it is tied to the fact that there have been a lot of shows in the past that have been tied to one specific character. Like, that's the character that makes the whole engine move, and you follow them in that. But also there's an amount of, like, outside, very meta-ness of, like, Cavill being so tied to the character and so tied to, like, his love of the series and things like that. And also reports of, like, back and forth on the authenticity of the books and this and that. There's so much of that I feel like some of that is very much bleeding into reactions. And I also think part of it, too, is that, a lot of critics in season 1, it is a lot. It's a lot. Like, even someone coming from the books, it's a lot. And, they could have benefited from some smoother changes, maybe some change. I didn't mind the time jumping and stuff like others, but, like, I can understand, like, why it's hard. And then here, I feel like this is what I really want the show to be. I want the show to have Geralt as a central piece, but he's not the only piece. And really, this season works to me, and maybe this is to the bigger issue for some. Ciri's role is much more pronounced in this season, as is Yennefer's, but not as the typical way of like they're helping Geralt do something. In like first couple seasons, you see a lot of like Geralt helping them survive, or in Yennefer's case, like them fighting side by side. It's a lot of that stuff. Here, it's really more about them being a family, and they're both raising Ciri. And you can see that throughout the entire season. Like there's some moments between Ciri and Yennefer later on where they're going back and forth like a daughter and a mom. Yeah. Like she says some mean things. Yennefer like takes it on the chin and like is like, hey, you need to get used to reality. How many conversations have parents had like that with kids, right? And then later they're both like, let's not let that happen again. You feel bad. She's actually running from Artusa. And that leads to an awesome wild hunt scene, which is like pretty much from the books, but Yennefer's in that spot instead of Ciri. But you see like her running after, she says like, you're not Geralt. And what does that say like of a step parent coming in and being like, well, you're not my dad or you're not my mom. Like those things very much carry over. And there's a lot of that. And that's why I enjoy it. Like in our interview, I even said, like, there's moments of, you see Geralt, they have conversations, just the two of them, about her being a Witcher or becoming a Witcher and just her growing up. And there's just such a real, it feels genuine. It's like a real authentic bond between them. And she starts to have that with Yennefer. And by the end, that's what I love most about the series. It's not just Geralt being in a fight, taking on a monster. The monsters are secondary to me. They've become secondary, and I feel like they should be, because they're supposed
just
to be
everywhere. It's just a part of their world.
It's just a thing, right? We talk about Walking Dead and the zombies all the time, right? The zombies are just a part of the world, but it's everything else. And in this, it's that way. And there's still a lot of scenes like straight up from the books, but it's really about this family, and that's what I like. And I'm interested to see, like, once a lot of people get to see it, what they think.
Yeah, we're talking about some highlights, but my favorite line in kind of really character building was, and I didn't think about it until it was actually said, is like, there's a scene when Yennefer's talking to, I want to butcher her name, Tissaia.
Oh, Tissaia, yeah.
Tissaia. And she says, oh, like, you finally got that thing that you had to give up for. You finally become a mother. And in that moment, Yennefer's kind of like, and then she's like, oh, yeah, like, yeah.
She's been searching that for 2 years.
Exactly.
For 2 seasons.
And it was all about this baby and recovering and being able to get pregnant. And you didn't really realize it. But yeah, no, like, family took another form for her. And she very much is now this matriarch to this other girl, which is, like you said, is the best part of this. Is there are scenes of just, like, I think one of my favorite scenes is, like, so, Geralt and Yennefer aren't thawed out their relationship yet, and there's even like the dwarf guy says something funny about that, like, oh man, it's been like frozen here for a long time. But there's like one scene that everyone can, when you're parents, when you have tension between you and your partner, and then like Ciri says like, oh, I'm going to bed, and she gets up and goes to bed, and they're just sitting at the table for a minute, and it's like so awkward, and you're like, you guys about to like fight or do that other F, like what's about to happen here? And they both don't know what to do, and they like get up and kind of awkwardly separate. And I was like, how many nights have I been there? Like, with my wife, like, I wanted to maybe hang out with you or do something, but we've just been through a day. We yell at each other, like,
And then you see someone come over, and like Jaskier is perfect for that. Comes over, lightens the mood, knows when to crack a joke at like the most awkward times, and like them watching them and like acting out the scene when they're like, they make up essentially, and they're in the bushes like making up scene and talking back and forth. But like it's fun, but there's actually like a real conversation there that happens between them real quick. And so that stuff is what I love, and I think this season does it best than all the others. And I think what we were missing, and I said in this in our regular non-spoiler review, is that you need some kind of heart core to this. It sounds like I'm saying hardcore, but heart or core to this, emotional core, and the family stuff is there, but also we get like actual romance in this one. Like, and those are the ones that are already blowing up. Like I said, I did a reactions that people are having. Those are the biggest clips out here are the bath scene, which we were going to get, but this time is like the one people really want. And the ball scene. Like everything from them dancing at the ball to when that other sorceress tries to... Oh, Sabrina,
Sabrina comes up and tries to get Geralt with the
And it's fantasy. Great because he actually, the way he acts in that, like he actually has cake in his mouth. It's like, it was so well executed. I thought that part was great.
And he's like, Yennefer looks great tonight or something. Like, there's already swooning across social media about Yennefer and Geralt finally kind of putting the heat out and giving us some like hot romantic moments, which and
we also get, what's great is Jaskier and Radovid also have their own moment. And that's like people like that chemistry is hilarious because Radovid's such a weird, quirky character.
The first time they start feeling each other out, like figuratively, figuratively. The first time they start feeling each other out when he's in front of him and they're talking, and he's like, "The Witcher, do you know how lucky he is?" You're like, "Wait, are they flirt?" You're like, what's happening here?"
And then he does his song, and Jaskier performs, beautifully in this. The monsters that do show up are cool. I dig them. The Jackapace shows up. The Wyvern, the Flesh Monster. That was so well executed.
Because and it looked good.
It looked good. Not even just the creature, but the 3-pronged souls that it. Like,
the women on the wall, and each time he was like killing. Like that was so disturbing. Like every time he stabbed one of its hearts, like one of them died on the wall. That was some straight Cronenberg The Thing type stuff, and I was like, oh. God.
And then you see this greater plot form from there of why are these young sorcerers here, and why is one of them think she's Ciri? right? Because then there's this big thing of like this fake Ciri, and that comes into play. And
that got me on that. That hook got me. I got up and was like, no. I was like, if Matt hasn't told me, like, and I was like, oh.
And you even get a mini like werewolf scene, and he's awesome. He's an awesome character. So like, there's the way they've been threading it through though of like, okay, well, who's behind this, and who of the is it in the Brotherhood, or is there a mage behind it? And so like, I thought they kind of drip that out very well throughout the first 5 episodes.
More importantly, physically just saying, and sometimes The Witcher has to be this obvious, saying there is a big bad pulling these strings was already like, okay, in the beginning, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Now I got something to find out, like I got a hook.
And Rience is great as a villain, and it's just pure force of destruction. Yeah. But even the little plants, I've always enjoyed what Witcher's done with magic, and like, I always enjoy when like Doctor Strange goes there of like the weight of magic, the cost, like what that costs. And like here, right, when they describe fire magic as like fire magic like takes a piece of you when you use it, and so there's all these differences between them because Ciri's learning. Ciri's like an absurdly powerful being, but she doesn't know how to harness it yet. And then we get to the conclave, the big scene at the end, and so for me, that the tease is obviously that, and we haven't even touched on Philippa and Dijkstra. There's some scenes between them that are something else. They have a very odd relationship. He's a very good spy. Oh, we gotta talk about this. We gotta talk about the Queen's Head, because so I'm a big like fan of just like random props like that. And so at one point when Dijkstra brings the king the box and he sets it up, and it's the decapitated queen, it's the decapitated head of his wife. It's so screwed up, but like I thought it does so well, because the scene after Radovid is really starting to feel like some confidence. He has some pull, and Dijkstra immediately just like, no, I shut this down. Like, I will do this, and I will do this to you. I will make it all. There's so much good stuff there. We're gonna get more of that, but this does set up a huge. There's multiple wars in the Witcher universe, and the second war is really kind of what this season is setting up. Time of Contempt, they pull a lot from that, like directly, and they've made no bones about that. They said in interviews, but there is a major in the books. There's a major battle that happens here, like right after, and in fact, like the stuff and it happens at the conclave, and so like people start fighting. There's like on different fronts, people are scattered. There's betrayals, and there's even like, at some point, I'm very curious to see if I don't know how we don't get it in the season, but Geralt has a battle in the books shortly after this, and he loses, and we are not accustomed to seeing Geralt lose. And he doesn't just lose; he is owned. And so I won't say who it is, but in fear of like what that might mean. But like, that happens in the books. That happens here. That happens like shortly after this. There's a lot of stuff that gets covered, and so I was curious to see like where they would end it, where they would cut it. And I agree with you. I think I would have. I don't know whether you cut it in the middle or cut it ahead. I wasn't like 100% pleased. I think we could have had a better hook to really get you like, oh, something's coming in the next thing. But the next couple of episodes should be really interesting. Should be epic. So I'm hoping. Fingers crossed. I haven't seen them, so fingers crossed that happens.
Whew, all right. I think that's. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else? Oh, all right. So, what do you think? I feel like this is a weird point. Again, we're at a pivotal moment, because I feel like this has been the best we've seen Henry Cavill as Geralt. But it's also his swan song. He's on the way out, right?
Yeah.
So, how are you feeling? Do you think, based on your knowledge, and I'm asking you, because I don't know, based on what you've already seen set up here, do you think they can pull off this transition from, because in season 4 it'll be Liam Hemsworth who takes over, and then in our non-spoiler review we actually went, I'm realizing how much we talked about this already, but we already went kind of deep into the lore about how they can use the different spheres and different worlds to possibly pull this off. Do you think they're going to fit this kind of organically and smoothly into this, or is it going to be kind of weird for everybody?
I think they can. It's super hard to say until I see Liam Hemsworth in that role. I don't know. And this comes from, like, I've seen some of his previous work. I mean, he's acted in other things. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but I'm not, like, super familiar with his filmography and things like that. So, like, outside of the Hunger Games, I've seen him in the Hunger Games, and I've maybe seen, like, one other thing. That's it. I don't have, like, a real broad base of Liam. So until I see him, what his Geralt looks like, and more importantly, anyone can do... Not anyone. That's not correct. A lot of people can do the stunts, can do the action, can make an awesome action scene. We've seen it time and time again. That's not what makes Geralt work. It's this balance of this stoic demeanor, but yet this comforting presence, all those things. That's what makes him work. And so if Liam can capture that, that's not as easy to capture. And if he can do that, then yes, I think it'll hit a hitch. Obviously, you're going to have people that just won't accept it, period. Doesn't matter how good he is. But until I see him in that, it's going to super hard to kind of get a read. It can very easily go sideways. I will say that. If he doesn't kind of embody that part like people are used to seeing, it can be different, but he needs to still embody it, then it could fall apart. Which is unfortunate, but like, you know, he still is your star. Like, Geralt's still a linchpin to so many things, so he does have to work. But I also think it's not correct to then write off everything just because it's not Henry Cavill. That's where I take the most issue of, like, people like, well, Cavill's gone, so it's done. That's dumb to me. That's simplifying something. There's so much going on in the world. I don't think that's right. However, he does need to work. He's your linchpin. Everything revolves around Geralt. And if he doesn't work, how are you going to do that? That's like Superman doesn't work in your Superman movie. It's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's how it is. And I didn't even mean the Superman comparison, but hey, you know, that worked out. You know, but
Yikes.
like, it's you have to. So we'll see. Because of the writer's strike, who knows when the hell that's going to, like, actually get underway and all that. But I am very curious to see if we actually get our first look at him in the second chapter. It would make the most sense to do the swap there and leave Liam as your last impression, because that is going to be your Witcher moving forward.
Yep.
Instead of doing the thing of where they just don't acknowledge it until season 4. I think that's too abrupt.
Yeah, no, I think it has to end with, like, as you said, like, something Geralt has to do.
Yeah.
Surviving, and they all, like, it is a big thing. They come back and they almost like Spider-Man Homecoming. It like he walks out a portal and they're just like, what the and it just cuts and they're like,
and then everyone will discuss it, dissect it, but you give all that time to get it to let it sink in the people that are like, oh, this is our Geralt, this is how it is. And then when season 4 comes around, you don't have to do all that work. If you just leave it as Cavill's swan song and you don't even touch on it, I think that's setting yourself up for such a backlash when it actually happens.
Yeah, I agreed. You gotta start warming people up to this now. Like,
it's happening. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
So it's like, it's nuts. But all right. I think that's it. I think we covered the first half. We'll be back next month when we got to do The Witcher Season 3 Part 2. But for now, I think we got it. I think we did it. So, all right. Thank you guys for listening to this bonus round episode. I hope we didn't make any of you Witcher fans mad. Do not dox us or anything crazy.
I probably did.
Yeah, you probably did. If you are just getting into Comic Book Nation because you wanted to hear our Witcher content, be sure you go back on your favorite podcast platform or on our @Comic Book Nation YouTube page, Comic Book, all one word, -Nation, and check out our regular episode this week. We talk about The Witcher, Secret Invasion, a whole bunch of other great stuff. Otherwise, we will see you guys next week on our regularly scheduled show. Have fun checking out The Witcher, and we will see you next time on Comic Book Nation. Peace.
Deuces.